present to us would be helpful. Morning.
Morning, Mr. Chairman.
So is anyone else coming forward to present this? If you do, if you'd like to, please make your way here. And if you'd like to begin, that'd be great.
I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
To the two chairs and members of the committee and staff. I'm Chris McKenzie, Executive Director of the League of California Cities, and I've had the pleasure of immersing myself in the work of cities and the work of the CAMTC board over the last year, especially in the last 4 months. And I wanted to share with you a few observations. We don't have a formal position on the sunset process itself yet. We're working our way through that process in our organization. I did want to start out and say you've seen some evidence, I think, of some real progress and some very hard work on the part of the CAMTC board and the staff. And I think that the work, especially with disapproving schools, as Mike Callaghy said, I think has been very, very significant and provides substantial benefit in fighting human trafficking and other kinds of issues. With regard to AB 1147 and its implementation, I understand why there's some questions being raised about the actions of local agencies. I would remind you, we've had about a year to get back into this business. The Land Use Authority was taken away. It was returned about a year ago. And it's going to take a few years for everybody to get their sea legs and get back to work on this. We have sponsored some webinars. We've sponsored some training programs. We're working with the CAMTC staff to get information out. But it's going to take a little while to get this in the hands of our members. The city attorneys have had a training seminar on it. The certification or the revocation process that Mr. Callaghy mentioned is probably the next thing we're going to be getting information out about and trying to share the benefits of that whole approach with our membership. At the same time, I wanted to share with you, while there is a lot of good work going on and cities, I think by our last count, we have about 50 cities that have updated their ordinances, but a number, as Beverly May said, are still in the process of tackling this whole issue. We do have some concerns, though, that I think could undermine the success that CAMTC has been making if they're not addressed, or at least from a policy perspective, you should weigh these issues as you make decisions through this process. I think it's fair to say that with the creation of CAMTC, it actually took the actions of both the legislature and the people who incorporated this new entity. It is a hybrid entity. And we're all at times struggling to understand what it is and what it can really do. The question the chair asked about the loyalty provision is a perfect example. You would never find that in a public body, and it's one of the issues that we've expressed concerns about. But let me quickly, if I could,
because this isn't a public body.
Well, it actually is a public body for certain purposes because the legislature has made it subject to the Bagley-Keene Act, which is an act which applies to public bodies. It is arguably also subject to the Public Records Act. If you look at the case law and the constitutional provision that the voters added a few years ago, it is arguably subject to the Public Records Act, although the attorney for CAMTC disagrees with that statement. I think this is the tension. And you may want to maintain the tension, but it is a tension which has led to a number of questions and difficulty of creating, I would say, the strongest partnership, which is the kind of partnership we need to have between this entity, which many cities still don't really understand, notwithstanding its work. They don't really understand why working with a private nonprofit, they don't work with other private nonprofits in a regulatory capacity. So I'm just pointing out, this understanding, this framework is something that was going to take extra effort on everybody's part right now. We've identified some specific questions that we would urge you to look into. One is the question of eligibility of board members, and it really goes to this issue of who can remove members of the board. With a public body, a purely public body, including at the local level, your eligibility can only be challenged with the permission of the Attorney General through what's called a quo warranto process. In this entity, the CAMTC board asserts that even for members appointed by the League of California Cities and other bodies representing public agencies, that the board itself has the power to remove members of the board. It's not clear whether the League or other appointing authorities can remove. When you change the board, you gave them, the board itself, 3 appointees. I would assume they have the power to remove those 3 appointees. But whether they have the power to remove the other appointees, I think, is an unanswered question. And if it is a public body, for some purposes, the way to do that would be possibly through the quo warranto process or some other way. This question, it just came up recently about the eligibility of a board member, and it ties right into some of the other issues I'm going to raise. The filling of board vacancies. It's not clear that when a board vacancy is filled, if it occurs, that it's for the balance of the term or whether the term itself starts running again, the 4-year term. These are 4-year terms. Simple matter that can be remedied with an amendment. The removal for disloyalty, I would respectfully submit, is a very, very serious problem. To the extent this is a public body, and it certainly is for Bagley-Keene purposes, if not others, the idea of a board silencing or censoring its own board members and removing them possibly for that action, I think is a deeply troubling policy. It's inconsistent with all of our traditions about how public bodies should operate. Now, the League of California Cities does have the aspirational statement that was read, but it does not have a policy that allows its board to remove the members of its board, which, by the way, include appointees of mayors and other parts of our organization. We would never assume that we could remove those individuals. So we would recommend that that problem be solved. The Public Records Act, I've already indicated that CAMTC is arguably subject to it when you look at the definitions within the Act and the overarching constitutional requirement. You have specifically made it subject to the Bagley-Keene Act, not to the Public Records Act, creating the negative implication that it's not subject to the Public Records Act. We would recommend that you look at this issue, make it subject to the Public Records Act. I know from personal experience, I've not been able to get records of CAMTC that would have been valuable in preparing our representative for its first board meeting. And they were denied to me, and I think under the Public Records Act, they would not have been denied to us. The issue of educational briefings was mentioned earlier indirectly. It's not enough, as you know, to give board members a copy of the Bagley-Keene Act. They absolutely need to be trained in how it applies to their entity. Not all parts of the Bagley-Keene Act apply to this entity. We urged our delegate urged the board at its last meeting to invite the Attorney General in to do a training so they had an outsider they could validate that they were getting the gospel, if you will, on the Bagley-Keene Act. They chose instead to have their counsel do the training. That certainly is a step in the right direction. But unlike the entities under DCA where the training has to be done, this doesn't have to be done. And I would urge you to look at requiring that kind of training, because when they make a mistake, it could be extremely painful for members of the board. And as you know, it's typically the members of the board who may innocently make these mistakes. And the staff is there to prevent them from doing it, but the staff makes mistakes as well because they may not be up on it. This is one of the areas in which the staff review mentioned the amendment to the bylaws and the articles of incorporation. As you know, they removed all reference to CAMTC being a quasi-public body. Again, this goes to the heart of the ambiguity that the statutory scheme creates, and maybe on purpose, but to say it's not a quasi-public body when it is for purposes of the Bagley-Keene Act is certainly inconsistent. And when I requested the information under the Public Records Act that we needed to get our delegate ready for the meeting and it was denied, I pointed out that the very articles of incorporation of CAMTC make reference to it being a quasi-public body. And then shortly thereafter, on the day before the new board was seated, they took that reference out. They made other changes to the articles of incorporation. Now, these are all governance, transparency kinds of concerns. They're very important. I don't want to confuse it with the important work that the CAMTC staff and board is doing, which we are supporting every way we can. We want to see it be successful in its mission. But these underlying concerns will continue to trip us all up if we don't clarify the rules and understand what kind of entity this really is. With that, I want to thank you very much for your attention and be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. Karen Ling on behalf of the San Francisco Department of Public Health. First, I want to thank the committee for returning the local land use controls back to the cities and counties. That was incredibly important to us, so thank you for doing that. We did want to make some recommendations regarding any changes to the statute. Firstly, regarding the appointing agencies and their appointees, we would greatly appreciate the fact that once they're made an appointment to the board, that those nominating agencies are not questioned. That occurred very specifically in San Francisco. So we would appreciate the fact that it would not be challenged. Secondly, we would encourage the terms to turn over every 2 to 4 years so that old leadership could cycle off, new leadership could cycle on, and there would be more transparency and diversity on the board. Thirdly, when 1147 went through the process, there were new appointments made, new positions added to the board. However, a lot of those positions were filled before the statute took effect. So the San Francisco Department of Public Health would encourage the committee to adopt guidelines for how those appointments are made and when and by who. And finally, regarding the public health appointment, we would encourage the committee to add to the statute that the State Department of Public Health official name that appointee, so there's no question about who can appoint the Department of Public Health representative. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions. I did want to observe to the committee that before 1147 is going through the process, the city and county of San Francisco has always regulated, or has regulated for years, massage establishments in the city and county of San Francisco through their public health department and not take a public safety approach to it simply because the human trafficking element is so severe. So they're trying to get at this problem through the public health department. They have their own local license. They can revoke their licenses locally. They're not relying only on CAMTAC. It's the practitioner's decision in San Francisco whether or not they want to go through CAMTAC or if they want to go through the Department of Public Health in San Francisco. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Laura Embleton with ABMP. We are the largest professional membership association in the nation, and we have 12,112 members in California, most of which are certified by CAMTC. I may have had a cold. I don't normally sound like this. Our big issue that we have with this current situation is we really strongly think that mandatory licensure is a big benefit. Most of the states, 45 states in the country, have mandatory licensure. It's based within a division of the state, usually the Department of Health, and it clarifies and enhances certainty. For example, local governments no longer have to have duplicate licenses and administrative processes for certified or uncertified professionals. All therapists would be subject to the same state law while securing establishment licenses from local jurisdictions. Police enforcement is dramatically simplified. It's just show me your license. It's not who's licensed or certified, who's not certified. Consumers can determine whether the individual offering services is in fact licensed by consulting an updated directory or insisting on seeing the license. Transparency is enhanced for all parties because the state agency is in charge instead of a private entity. We applaud the work that CAMTC has done and that it was reflected in AB 1147 and in previous adjustments to effectuate a transition on our currently issued certifications and allowing holders to convert to a certification to a state license without further hoops is what we would like to see. I guess that's about it. Mandatory licensure just offers the best advances for public protection. It's time to take that final step in massage regulation. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hi,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Cheryl Becker, and I'm a massage therapist for 15 years. And due to the Senate Bill 731 requirements, I lost my job and many other hard workers as well. I never received any notification from the Senate Bill 731 from the CMATC and the state or my employer. When I contacted the Massage Council in 2013, I mailed in my application, my wife's fingerprints, and a check for $150, hoping to be grandfathered in. I was denied recertification for filing too late. They kept my money, and I was rudely told, "Too bad you filed too late." Bill 731 requires 500 hours of training. My 15 years experience is worth more than 500 hours. In order to work, I have to go back to school, and it'll cost me thousands of dollars. The Massage Council has initiated a test, which will be another burden of $200 for the test. And if you don't pass the test, you have to pay another $200 for the test until you pass. This bill has put many honest, hardworking people out of work. This bill needs to be changed, and the Massage Council needs to be more flexible.
Very good, thank you for that question. Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
We're supposed to come up after for public.
Yes, for public would be after, but if you'd like to, while you're here, if you'd like to be,
So I'm Jessica Arguello. I'm a certified acupressure massage therapist, licensed with CAMTC. Before changing careers 2 years ago, I had a successful career for 30 years in operations and facilities, admin, management, high-tech corporate. So I have a very long-standing, tenured experience in Silicon Valley, Santa Clara County. What I experienced in moving over and transitioning to a heart-based industry as a massage therapist is the requirement to be fingerprinted and background checked several times at my personal expense. Also, I'm not allowed to travel from the several towns and cities within a 25-mile radius of where I live due to zoning laws that prohibit me from working in structures that are regulated or zoned as R residential. So I'm only allowed to work in commercial buildings. And I'm also an qualified oncology massage therapist, so I work with cancer patients who are undergoing chemo and radiation, who cannot travel, if any of you have known anyone suffering from cancer. So I'm unable to reach that community. Going back to the business registrations, annually it would cost over $1,000 for me to work just in the neighboring cities and towns where I live. Just to read very briefly, someone whose father is suffering stroke, they have a massage therapist come to their home to do traditional Chinese medicine massage, which is what I do, to work on his muscles, relieve pain, and help to, with his motor skills. He was paralyzed on the left side, so through only 5 weeks of massage therapy, and the massage therapist working with a licensed acupuncturist who is allowed to work in the R residences, by the way. This man is now up and walking, so he would not have been able to get this service if he was not allowed to get this in the home. And with stroke victims, it's very critical that they get addressed very quickly, or their condition can decline rapidly. So I would appreciate the opportunity as a professional with long-standing, over 30 years of experience as a professional, I'm a little nervous, in the county, to be able to continue to do and provide professional services in this heart-based industry. So thank you very much.
thank you very much.
Yeah, I have
Senator Wachowski.
a question, because I'm concerned about this this returned authority to local governments, whether some cities have used that as a de facto moratorium. When we allowed them to impose reasonable and necessary regulations. I've heard reports that now all massage establishments in one of the cities that I represent have to pay a $7,500 licensing fee. We've got other fees, other than the human trafficking and the sex trade. Is this really that complicated of an industry that it needs all this regulation? I mean, why I'm concerned that the ability that we gave to cities to impose these fees, why in the world would we want to allow a legislation to go forward when you charge $7,500 for one type of industry that evidently your city council or your police chief don't like? And you got 480 cities, and some of them are just basically have a moratorium. And that wasn't the intent of 1437. If that's the right number, right? And I was wondering if you could shine some light on why I'm wrong.
Happy to respond to that if I could. 1147 returned the full panoply of land use powers to cities and counties. That includes things like conditional use permits. What most cities used before it, and they're continuing to use, is issuing business licenses. And in connection with those business licenses, they can charge, as you indicated, a reasonable fee. They can't charge an unreasonable fee, nor can they violate any parts of 1147 in carrying out their activities. So every city is going to be different. They're going to have their own attitudes about this, but I want to underscore, we had a crisis before 1147 with the explosion of illicit massage operations. At the end of the day, the state of California is not does not have the capacity to supervise the response to that. It takes the hard work of the men and women who work in city and county governments. Now, they have different approaches to doing it. Some are going to probably start with a heavier regulatory scheme than others will, and then as things are working, they will change it. As I indicated to you, I'm interested in getting the word out about the revocable scheme that Mike Callaghan was talking about, because if we can provide that tool to them and they can see that it's being used and it's less work for them and it's more effective, and if they know their partner at CAMTC is going to be there when this new database gets up and running and they have direct access to that database, online access to that database, it's going to be a very powerful tool for the local agencies as well. So again, I want to underscore, it's been about a year. And this is something that's going to take a few years for them to get their feet wet and really figure out how to respond to this.
I guess the concern is that some member cities are taking such a cavalier attitude about this returned ability to regulate that we have hardworking 30-year residents that are effectively out of a job. There's a moratorium in their city under this guise of crime prevention. And again, that's the police's purview, not the permit, the licensing board. That's before us. Not the police are not coming up and saying we need more tools. And that's when you have that apparent abuse of regulatory power, then there's a concern that I have of whether this is a scheme that should be continued.
I could. You're going to hear some stories. We can tell stories. I want to stress again, to make a judgment about whether this is working after 1 year of experience is probably, after years of a terrible, terrible problem, getting CAMTC running in an efficient, timely, responsive way is going to create the opportunity for the kind of partnership that will allow local agencies to back off in some areas. But remember, they had no control before when it came to land use authority. They'd just gotten it back. So it's easy for us to sit here and say we would do it differently, but there are many that are doing it, I think, quite well. And it's going to be a very dangerous thing, I think, to try and legislate in a broad way. You're going to end up undercutting some very effective local regulatory schemes. I understand what you're saying, sensitive to it as well, but I would urge you to exercise great care. Give it a few more years.
Thank you. Let me just follow up on Senator Wachowski's question, if I may, because we're talking about AB 1147, but how many cities have actually shut down illicit massage businesses because of 1147 in the last year?
We haven't tried to collect that information.
Okay.
I know some have. They've told us they have, but we haven't
Didn't you
collected
just
the
send out a survey?
We're doing a survey, yes, but we didn't ask that particular question.
Got it.
We asked how many have amended their ordinances. We've asked how their relationship is with CAMTC, but we haven't collected that data. Now, CAMTC may have it, but we didn't collect the data.
It seems that you know, the reason that we're pretty much sitting here is before 1147 and before the council was adopted and put into place as a nonprofit, intentionally done and created as a nonprofit, that the reason much of this was done was because of the problems that Senator Wajkowski was mentioning, the high costs, the moratoriums, the restrictions, and the abuses, really, of cities against the profession. And now, as we gave that authority back, we're starting to see it over again. And so I think hopefully we will see some changes in the near future with the cities that are creating those moratoriums, that work with the council to try and develop some good relationships to make it work, because it seems to be successful in those areas where it does. I have a couple of questions that I wanted to find out, because it's going back to this is we felt, the legislature felt, it is a nonprofit. It's not quasi-public. The Bagley-Keene was established so that the meetings will run appropriately and properly. But I mean, this you mentioned this hasn't been done before. The Council on the Tax Preparers Council is over 15 years old, exact same relationship, exact same structure, working fine without any difficulty. I guess the question that I have is you're in your letter, and the concerns you've raised are all related to how the board functions, how the board is made up. I have not seen any criticism or any issue related to how the council has been functioning and the successes that they had, or problems that may have been created because of that. I mean, these issues that you've raised are all, I mean, as I see them, that's, you know, whether we should have more education in the briefings. I mean, you know, this is minor operational stuff. It's not dealing with what is actually the council, what has been their success, what has been the relationships that they've built and how they've operated, or concerns that you may have or the cities may have with how it's operating today.
Mr. Chairman, we have done a survey recently. We'll be sharing that with you shortly. I'm sorry it wasn't available today, but the police chiefs in the league did the survey. It addresses some of those issues. I think you'll find it very helpful. That's why, by the way, I led my comments off with recognizing the good work that CAMTC has done. Going back to the whole question about the public-private status question, cities don't work with those other two organizations. They're used to working with state agencies, other local agencies, regional agencies. This is a private entity. There are very few private entities that have their charter this extensively laid out in state law. And they provide a very, very important service and function. And we want to see them be very successful. Mm-hmm. My point when I led off on the governance and transparency issues is if they don't operate in a transparent way, if their board is not trained to follow the Bagley-Keene Act, if they don't share information with their stakeholders, it's going to undermine their success. Yes, in the big picture, it's not nearly as important as revoking certificates in a timely way, but it eventually could undermine the ability to do that if nobody trusts them.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McKenzie. Other questions? Yeah, and just one thing on the, you know, it just seems that what has come to light is just really a lack of a fair and reasonable treatment of the profession by cities that have really taken advantage of their ability to restrict it. And then going back to my comments with Mr. Callaghy, it seems like they've taken the easy way out rather than looking at something that is a little more complex maybe in working with the council to try and solve whatever minor part of the profession is dealing in illegitimate operations. And that, you know, I hope that you will look at that, and I think the cities have always done they want to see something that works, and I think there are opportunities here as the communication and the relationship can be built and strengthened that can save everyone at the end of the day. So I really appreciate your being here today and in your comments. So thank you, Mr. McKenzie. Other questions? Very good. Thank you very much, and appreciate your comments today and being here. You know, I don't think if the members of the council would like to respond to some of these concerns briefly, that would be great, and then we can move on to the next one. I'm sorry? Well, we will have public comment, yeah. We're not going to leave. Okay. If you'd like to respond briefly to some of the comments that were made, it'd be helpful. And some of the concerns, if you have any, on the recommendations that have been made.